And now we are joined by Philadelphia's #1 hockey beat reporter. It is Charlie O'Connor joining us. A wild back and forth game at the world's most famous train station tonight, Charlie. What are your biggest takeaways?
Bill, I'm sorry. I could hear you guys before I came on. The minute I came on, I can't hear you again. So I don't know what the issue is. Let me try coming back in and out.
All right, we will try to get Charlie.
Oh, never mind.
There he is.
I got you now.
Now,
Hey,
Charlie,
I can hear you now.
All I did was make a world's most famous train station joke, crazy back and forth game. What were your biggest takeaways?
I mean, I think, honestly, if you want to look at this from the most positive perspective, it's that the Flyers and every team in hockey knows that you don't get into a track meet with the New York Rangers. Like, that's just not what you do, because they are built to win these kinds of back and forth trade chances types of games. They have the Artemi Panarin's, the Mika Zibanejad's, the Chris Kreiders, the Adam Foxes on the back end. Like, this is how they win. This is how they win games. The Flyers, for 2 periods, showed that they can slow the Rangers down. They played a defensive clinic, really, for the first, I would say, 35 minutes of this game. The Rangers finally started to get going around the 5-minute mark. They obviously score that goal on the power play, so Zibanejad finally breaks through. Then they have some good shifts afterwards. They come out in the third, and they're playing New York Rangers hockey, exactly the way they want to play in order to win. And you're thinking to yourself, this is over. They take the 3-2 lead. I legitimately didn't think the Flyers had a chance. The most encouraging thing about this game for me is that while the Flyers certainly don't want to play a track meet style game against the Rangers, they showed in the third period that if they have to, they can hang with them. And that's exciting because the Rangers, I mean, I don't know how this is going to play out ultimately. The Flyers obviously aren't a lock to make the playoffs, period. But if they make it, they could play the Rangers in round 1. That is an option. And while it's concerning that they just can't seem to beat this team, well, the lights went off, so I'm going to be a little bit darker. Anyway, whatever, MSG, you can never predict it. But while it's concerning they haven't been able to beat this team, and it's been a few years now since they've struggled to beat this team, the fact that they can hang with them and they seem like they're one play away from finally breaking through, it does make you feel a little bit better about that potential playoff matchup because, the Rangers worry me, of course, because you ultimately are going to have to beat this team 4 times. They seem like they can't even beat them once, but it does seem like they can play the styles they need to play in order to beat the Rangers, and that is encouraging, even if they haven't yet broken through against them.
Hey, Charlie, what's going on? JP over here. So I want to talk about the elephant in the room. We discussed this after the Carolina Hurricanes game at OT, but tonight the lineup, Poehling, Cates, and Sanheim to start it off, Charlie. Again, not a lot of skill there considering what the Rangers put out there.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as they did it, it jumped out at me. That, oh boy, they're doing this again. Let's see how it works out. And then the Flyers don't touch the puck for the entirety of the overtime, and Rangers score, game over. I had every intention of asking John Tortorella why John Tortorella chose not to speak after the game. So we got Brad Shaw for the so the Flyers have lost 3 times over the past week. They lost the overtime game to the Hurricanes. They lost the Florida game on Sunday, and then they lost this game. 2 of those times, Tortorella has chosen not to speak. The one time he did speak, he spoke for 39 seconds. So take that for what you will. What I will say is that I did ask Brad Shaw, and I prefaced the question with, look, this might be a better question for Torts, but it's the important question, why the Poehling duo to start overtime? And look, Brad Shaw, I'm not gonna rip Brad Shaw for his answer, because in the end, this is the head coach's decision, not the assistant coach. And it's not like the assistant coach is going to go out there and say, yeah, I disagree with my boss. But essentially what Brad Shaw said, which is exactly what I assumed the thinking of the coaching staff is on this, is that Poehling is a really good 2-way player. They're putting the 2-way guys out there in that first shift to try to win the faceoff and then ideally shut down the high-end offensive guys the other team sends out first. So then the second and third shift, they can throw out their offensive guys and take charge. Shaw also basically said, look, he thinks that Poehling has earned the right to be out there. He said it obviously didn't end the way they want it. but Shaw thinks he's the right guy to be out there. That's the thought process. I'm sure that is Tortorella's thought process as well. As we survive the first shift, we win second and third shifts. But as we talked about on the show, in my mind, the right move is to fight fire with fire. I know that Morgan Frost and Tippett are not as talented as Artemi Panarin. We all know that. But you know who also isn't as talented as Artemi Panarin? Ryan Poehling and Noah Cates. And that the gap is significantly larger with those guys versus Panarin. With that much ice, I don't know. I'd like to have people on the ice that I think have a better chance of getting a goal rather than just having the best chance at maybe preventing a goal. And even here, they didn't even do that. And this isn't me shitting on Poehling and Cates. I think highly of both of them as players. I strongly disagree with this decision. I don't like the fact that John Tortorella didn't go up there to justify it. But the reasoning from Bradshaw was exactly what I expected it to be in terms of what I was expecting to hear from Torts. We just didn't hear from Torts, we heard it from Shaw.
Yeah, this is getting a little ridiculous, Charlie, with the coach just kind of, I don't need to tell you shit, even though I demand accountability from everybody and, make a fool out of reporters every chance I can. But, that's part of the Tortorella show. We'll never not have jobs covering this team. Charlie, I don't want to focus too much on the negative because that was a fun freaking game despite the result. And the Flyers do pick up a point. That keeps them, at least for now, in that third Metropolitan spot. And we got a question in the Die Hard Discord from JChime90. And he just kind of wondered, outside of, the top-end guys who we expect to score, who do you think on this team could have like an outsized impact on a potential playoff series? And he referenced RJ Umberger against Montreal. My answer to that is Tyson Forester because he has been so clutch for this team lately. What do you think?
Yeah, that was before you even gave your answer. Forster was the guy I was thinking of. Obviously, he has one of the many big goals in the third period. You had to love the emotion from him, that celebration after the goal. That's the kind of stuff that makes people fans of a player when they see the player that pumped after scoring that kind of goal. It was a wild goal too. It almost goes in. The Rangers stop it. The puck bounces out, and then Forster buries it. It was just a fun little chaos play. But yeah, I think Forster is that guy. He's that X factor in a playoff series because you see it. You see the flashes of what he might be able to become. Just like how Claude Giroux, and I'm not comparing Tyson Forester to Claude Giroux in terms of what I think he will necessarily become in the future, but you think of Claude Giroux in the 2010 Cup run. During that season, he showed flashes. He finished with like 40-something points. You saw the talent, but it just wasn't all there. And then in that playoff run, he goes bonkers and is nearly a point-per-game guy, scores the game-winning overtime goal in the Cup final. Like Tyson Forester does seem like that potential X factor in a playoff series because the talent's there. He hasn't put it all together yet in terms of being able to do it consistently and on an every night basis. But if he gets hot in a playoff series, it's a lot easier to tap into talent that exists rather than for a guy just to like turn into a superstar randomly for 4 games. It's much easier when it's there. It's just not there all the time because hot streaks happen. And Forster's the kind of guy who could potentially get on a hot streak at a really key time. He's been a big part of what the Flyers have done these past few months, to be honest with you. So that's the only reason why you might hesitate to call him an X Factor, because he might not be an X Factor anymore. He just may be one of their best 6 forwards, period. I think John Tortorella views him as much as that. But I love the idea of Tyson Forester being a potential X Factor in a playoff series. I think that certainly could be what he might be able to provide if the Flyers get in.
Charlie, let's stay on that positive train. I want to look at Bobby Brink. He really caught my eye tonight. 14:58 a time on ice, 2 shots. And he had that great opportunity in that first period. We had the nice poke check that led to a shot opportunity. What'd you see from Bobby tonight?
I thought Brink had some really good shifts. That play obviously was great. He had some really strong shifts, I thought, in the third period as well. Look, he's a guy where I know Tortorella has had his issues with his defensive play, with his checking at times this year. I want to see Bobby Brink in every game the rest of the way. I don't know if he's going to play well in every game, but I want to see him in every game. I want him to get this experience. Like, Ole Luxell, sure. You know what? If you play him or you don't, that's fine. I personally would rather see Ole Luxell than, say, Cam Atkinson at this point, because Luxell might provide you something. I haven't seen pretty much anything from Cam over the last month and a half. But if you want to pull Alexei out of the lineup, I don't really necessarily view him as anywhere near a certainty to be part of the future anyway. I want Brink to be learning from these games. I want Brink to, 3 years down the road when hopefully he is a 55, 60-point guy and he's a key part of the second or third line of the Flyers and a key part of the power play or whatever. I want him in March when the Flyers are battling for a Metropolitan Division championship, hopefully, for him to draw on the experience of what he learned in these games. So I want Brink in these games, and I think he deserves to be in these games. He's playing well enough to justify being in these games. I thought tonight, the box score maybe didn't look great, but he had some really, really impressive shifts. And when you're playing a guy like a third liner, like a bottom sixer, if he gives you 4 or 5 really impressive shifts in a game, I'm okay with that, even if he's not making an impact every single shift, because that's the job of the guys that are getting 19 minutes a night, not the job of the guys that are getting 13, 14. I want him to be an energy spark plug. That's what Brink has been recently.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of all-star along the boards comments about Bobby Brink tonight, Charlie, and the references will never get old. We've talked a ton lately about the goaltending situation. Sam Arison, I thought tonight through 2 periods, he stops 17 of the first 18 Rangers shots. We've seen him kind of step up against some of the league's really best goalies, and I thought, okay, here's another one of those performances. And then 5 of the last 9 Rangers shots end up in the back of the net. I thought on the shorthanded goal, he really needs to get his stick on that cross-ice pass. A couple of bad bounces. TK, blocks the shot, and then it ends up on Lafreniere's stick. But what did you see out of Arison tonight? Because this was a little bit of a bummer in the third.
Yeah, and Arison said after the game he needs to find a way to make a few more saves. Look, you want your goalie to come up with some big saves. What I will say is that by the same token, Igor Shesterkin is a great goalie, undeniably, and he gave up 3 goals in that third period. You want Arison to make more saves, but that was just a chaos third period. That was a back and forth, helter-skelter type of third. It was unbelievably entertaining hockey. That was probably the most fun period I've seen this season. Not just Flyers related, but any hockey game this year. I think that was the most fun period I've seen. And sometimes in those periods, the goals are just going in because the shooters are feeling it and the goalies are just kind of hanging on for dear life. So, yes, Sam Arison needed to have a better third period. But I'm not going to kill him for it, because when you're in the arena and you're having there's a period like that, it just kind of gets out of control. And even a goalie like Igor Shesterkin has given up 3 goals because for whatever reason, the 2 teams are just feeling it and everybody's scoring. And that's kind of what happened there.
Charlie, let's stay on that goalie talk. So obviously yesterday we had the news of Alexei Kolosov coming over to North America. Some misinterpretation. He's not coming to the Flyers right away, correct?
Well, I did a piece on this for diehards only. So if you are a diehard, please check it out. It came out around 3:30, 4 p.m. today. This I do think is a case of just us believing that Twitter is the entire world, because it's Twitter that is losing its mind over Kolosov. Absolutely going crazy over him, because it's the perfect storm. It is people who are eat, sleep, and breathe Flyers. Those people on Twitter also tend to obsess over prospects because they eat, sleep, and breathe Flyers. And it's people who think about Flyers all the time, so they're desperately trying to find a solution to the Sandstrom problem. Here's the thing with Kolosov. Number one, this isn't new information. It's not new information that he's trying to come over. The Flyers and Danny Briere and Keith Jones over the last 2 weeks have been open about the fact that they are working to try to help Kolosov come over because he's already on an ELC. He was under loan this year. They loaned him to the KHL, so he's already under contract. If they can get him over here, he can play for the Phantoms or the Flyers or whatever. He's allowed to. It's not like they have to sign him to a deal. He's already under contract. So if Kolosov wanted to come over and try to get some North American experience before he takes the run at a full North American season to start next year, which was always the plan, the Flyers are all on board with that. Does that mean, however, number one, that he's going to show up tomorrow? No. He is still working through the visa process. This is still a whole thing. As I said on the show yesterday, I very much get the sense that like the Flyers are not going to do anything to rush this because they remember the Fedotov situation. They know they have Michkov coming in a few years. They don't want to rock the boat here. They don't want to get Kolosov in any trouble because it feels like, people from the United States are trying to expedite the process. So they're going to let that play out as it does. We'll see when he comes over. I do think he will get to come over to North America at some point in the next couple weeks, but whether that's in 3 days or 13 days, I don't know. It's just going to kind of come down to how the embassies, how the consulates, how all that stuff works out. Then, if he actually does get over here in enough time to potentially play in Flyers games, because let's be honest, the people losing their minds on Twitter about this only really care about whether he's going to get into Flyers games. They don't care of whether he's going to, hey, he'll get to play in a couple Phantoms games and maybe give Lehigh Valley a better chance of making the playoffs. That's not on anybody's radar. Everybody cares about whether he's going to be able to come in and play games for the Flyers in the middle of a playoff run. I don't get the sense that idea has been completely ruled out without question. However, I do get the sense that there would have to be a lot of things going in that direction. Like he would have to show up, really impress the coaches in practice. Like that would have to happen. Then maybe Sandstrom would have to have another really bad game. Or maybe Arison would have to be battling an injury. Like there would have to be a few things happen for them to be like, you know what, we're going to throw Kolosov into a game or two. I'm not saying it's definitely not going to happen. I am saying that I don't get the sense it's their preference, that it's not something that they are itching to do the same way a lot of people on Twitter are itching to get Kolosov into a game. I don't think that's what's going on. However, we are still talking about the Flyers. They are the chaos organization. They do crazy shit. This would be crazy. This would be, as much as people online seem to think this is the no-brainer, which I think is wild, this would be objectively nuts. What you would be doing is you'd be taking a guy who hasn't played in 2 weeks. If it takes him, say, another week to get over here, more days to have some practice to get a look at him, he might be coming in cold, a guy who hasn't played in a game in 3.5 weeks. You're throwing him into a playoff race in a league he's not familiar with, in a country he's not familiar with, in a continent he's not familiar with. This would be objectively nuts. The Flyers, however, often do objectively nuts things, so rule it out entirely, and I don't think it has been ruled out entirely. However, I do not think that this is the grand master plan of the Flyers, we're going to get Kolosov over here and then immediately turn him into our goalie. If that's what you're hoping for, I don't think that's what's going on, but I can't rule it out entirely. These are still the Flyers.
Yeah, absolutely, Charlie. I just have a couple more for you. Really just one and then 3 stars. Scott Laughton tonight scores his 13th goal of the season to open the scoring, gets his 24th assist on the second goal, the power play goal. Last year, 18 goals, 25 assists, career highs in both. After all the talk of his down season, he's pretty much going to match last year's numbers in a few minutes less every game of ice time on average. He only got 13 minutes tonight. What do you make of Scott Laughton's season and this second half resurgence?
Well, can I make a joke about how everybody who was terrified that Scott Laughton's trade value was going to go in the toilet can now, take a big old chill pill on that front? Because I guarantee you, after these last couple months, if the Flyers want to trade Scott Laughton, he's going to have suitors. People are going to love what they've seen from Scott Laughton over these last couple of months. Look, he's turned the season around, and I am going to pat myself on the back a little bit here because I was the one in December and January saying multiple times on this show that I fully expected that at some point Scott Laughton would remember that he's a legitimately good forward and he would get it going. He's been getting it going. I don't think he is, a game-breaking forward who is going to carry the Flyers, but I don't even think he thinks he's a game-breaking forward who's going to carry the Flyers. He's just a guy who's scoring now. He's playing the way he has to play. I mean, he's above Sean Couturier in the lineup. We can think whatever we want about that, but guess what? Laughton's scoring and Couturier isn't, so I guess there's that. Look, I'm unabashedly a Scott Laughton fan. I understand his limitations. I know that he's not an elite player by any means, and if the Flyers can get a haul for him in a trade, I'm not opposed to moving him. But he is showing over these last, really, I would say since the All-Star break, he's showing why he's valuable. He's showing why the Flyers don't want to move him, and he's showing why his teammates love him as much as they do. He's a really important piece for this team, both on and what he's reminding everyone of the last month and a half, both off and on the ice as well.
Absolutely, Charlie. And now, without any further ado, let's get to your 3 stars. Lead it off with star number 3.
Star number 3, oh, geez. Yeah, it's kind of comes down to whether I want to do 2 Rangers or just 1 Ranger. I'll go with just 1 Ranger. Yeah, so I guess I'll kick it off. I'll say Scott Laughton as my 3rd star. I think he had a really strong game all around. Obviously gets a goal and an assist. I actually kind of wonder what he could have done if he would have more ice time. He ends up ranking 9th among the forwards in ice time. I might have tried to get him on the ice a little bit more than he was personally. But I think Laughton made some really good plays. Obviously has that goal off the great pass by one Travis Konechny, who, spoiler alert, just might pop up in a second. But anyway, Laughton, strong game. We talked to him after the game. He obviously was jacked about the 3rd period, disappointed about how it ended, but excited about how his team dealt with this gauntlet of games. They didn't dominate, but they certainly, especially over the second half of the gauntlet, held their own. And I think Scott Laughton was a non-insignificant part of that.
All right, let's go to star number 2.
Yeah, star number 2, I'm going to go with Travis Konechny. Obviously, the great pass on the Laughton goal, scores another goal in the 3rd period. I don't blame him for the shorthanded goal because I think that's an interference penalty that the refs miss. Basically what happens is him and Krocek crash into each other. Krocek knocks Konechny down, goes down the ice. The only reason why that's a 2-on-1 is because Krocek knocked Konechny down. Konechny was rightfully ticked off. I guess you could say stay on your skates, but that could have been an interference penalty. I think it probably should have been an interference penalty. So I'm not going to ding him for that play. I'm going to say that Travis Konechny had, in my mind, and I know there were a lot of big goals in the 3rd period, I think he had the biggest goal of the 3rd period because the Rangers score early in the 1st, then they score again a minute and a half later. They take the 3-2 lead. You just felt like the Rangers were about to cruise. And then Konechny scores the goal that ties the game. I don't think this game turns into as much of a track meet if Konechny doesn't score that goal, because I think the Rangers probably score another one and then it's over. Instead, it becomes the back and forth game because the Flyers stop that momentum string that the Rangers had. They don't stop that momentum string if their best player, Travis Konechny, doesn't go out there and score a goal. So I give Travis Konechny the 2nd star of the game.
Last but not least, tonight's 1st star.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a guy who it's probably a bad thing that I'm talking about him for the Flyers, but Alexis Lafreniere, this guy, the last 2 times the Flyers have played the Rangers, I think Lafreniere has been the best Ranger on the ice. I do, and that's scary because you can watch Panarin and be like, damn, this guy's real good. You can watch Zibanejad and be like, man, he freaking kills the Flyers. They're older. They're going to start declining. I mean, Panarin is already in decline. He's just so freaking awesome that even declining Panarin is still real freaking good. But
hit 100 points for the first time.
Exactly. Lafreniere is young. He's going to be a thorn in the Flyers side for a while. And for a few years, it looked like the Flyers had dodged that bullet, that maybe he wasn't going to be as good as they thought he was going to be when he was drafted 1st overall, when the Rangers get lucky in the lottery. You're like, man, Flyers lucked out. Capo Caco and Lafreniere, they're not all that great. They're just decent players. The Lafreniere I saw in these last 2 games against the Flyers does not look like just a decent player. He looks like a guy who is really starting to come into his own. And I mean, that goal he scored with the puck, the shot that gets blocked, and then he just rips it. I mean, that was a ridiculous release. That goes back to what I was saying about Arison earlier. Yeah, you'd love him to make a stop, another stop somewhere. But I can't get mad at him not stopping that Lafreniere shot. That was a friggin' bullet. And that was just kind of the period. There were a lot of really, really good plays being made by really, really good players. I'm giving Lafreniere my number 1 star. I think he was the best player on the ice in a game of a lot of really good players making things happen on the ice.
All right, Charlie, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll talk to you again tomorrow from Montreal, I believe. So I'll
be in my hotel room.
Yeah. That'll be a lot of fun. Now get yourself out of that dump before they close you in there and you're trapped with all the rats.
All right, sounds good. Thanks guys.
Charlie.
We all silly like the mayor.